Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. All right. So it's been a while. I apologize for the long breaks. A lot of things to. I'm alone in this endeavor, so uh, all the things that need to be done by moi. So sometimes it takes me away from a regular schedule, but I'm working toward making that uh, with equipment and sound room and all of these things, um, that becomes less of a problem. Make sure we're plugged in there. Okay. Um, but also, I want to make sure you understand that when I do these videos and they're unscripted, they're off the cuff, and part of that reality is that I know I'm going to ad lib as I'm talking to you. That's my whole purpose in doing these, is that I can be thinking with Myoho Renge Kyo, this particular subject I'm going to be talking about, or aspect, or whatever, a part of this Dharma. And I like to be prepared. I mean, I've been studying for over 40 years this Buddhism, but first of all, as we witness in our own lives today, much different than 2,700 years ago. As we all know, technology and all of the things that it spawns are constantly evolving. But so are we as a living being. What you thought when you were 6 years old, when you were 12 years old, seemed ridiculous and totally crazy. And then in your 20s, you reevaluate a lot of things as well. You can't believe you were that person. And we continue to do that throughout our lives, let alone as a society, as a samsaric phenomenon, right? So it's one of the reasons that keeping old documents and teachings and understandings are important, because reflection is a helpful tool in deepening our understanding of our own evolution in mind. But it's also important to look at new scholarship, new investigations, new methods of investigation. The information hasn't changed, but our understanding changes. And isn't this Buddhism? Buddhism calls attention to that very mechanism and calls us to question our own samsaric identity, because identity is the mechanism that influences all of it, and become more aware to the point where we start to transcend this changing moment of understanding into a moment of deeper insight, so that our own samsaric understanding doesn't get in the way of our own Buddha understanding, Buddha knowledge, Buddha wisdom, right? These words, these things that influence and color the lenses that affect our perception, our cognition of things, of our worldview, then become modified, become more clear, become at least greater depth of visibility, right? So uh, all of that is to say that before I launch into a video, I like to review material, not only the material proper. Right now, while I'm doing the Go Show, we're going to wrap up this meditation, concentration, and insight Go Show. But also, there are a lot of documents that I've collected over the years that reflect on this, affect this. Like I did in the Lotus Sutra lectures, I had several different translations from the 1800s to the 1900s, and Kumarajiva's commentaries on Kumarajiva, and by Nagarjuna, and so on and so forth, on aspects of, and I'm about to say aspects of the Lotus Sutra, certainly that, but if you really dissect the Lotus Sutra, you end up everywhere. You end up studying the Dharma in its entirety. So when I was reading chapters of the Lotus Sutra and discussing them in that, you can go to that playlist, Lotus Lectures. It even affected the way I wrote the titles of the chapters, because humans use this thing called language, and we have to remember that it's a very loose uh, uh, framework, tool for us to verbalize or communicate something impossible to communicate, our understanding, our perception, which, as I've just said, is constantly changing. So words, being concrete in a way, when they're written, they have a form, they have a design, they have a definition. When used by us, are really just pointers, because each one of us hears those words with our own baggage, if you will, our history of perception. Sorry, and like the fountain analogy, uh, we not only experience things one to another differently, even down to words, um, but over time we ourselves change our minds as to what certain words, combinations of words, etc., what they mean, what value they have, what can't, uh, even intonation. Language is very tricky that way. So much as we try with language to be intimate and communicate directly, uh, even honestly, um, the direction at which language works is really toward ourselves. Um, because we hear what we say and we understand what we say to ourselves. And there's just this expectation that that whole package will somehow magically penetrate the interlocutor, right? Um, and if that were the case, then the whole interview format would cease to exist, uh, because without feedback from the other person, uh, first of all, we don't know that they understood what we just said in a different way, but we don't appreciate that how fallible words are. And thirdly, we gain some insight as to how another person sees something, albeit our version, our perception of what it is they're seeing. I've often said it's a wonder we communicate at all, but language is our best tool to date to try to do that. Um, and Buddhism recognizes this. It dissects this. And this is why ultimately uh, Namu Myoho Renge Kyo is the universal solution, because it's based on your experience of the Dharma, not a transmittal. And this is why Nichiren created the Gohonzon, so that we could have this reflector made whole, made obvious. And if we all share the same reflector and use the same invocation, then the Dharma is what comes through to each and every one of us in its own specific way, as it has to in samsara. See, all of this is a tool to bypass the 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 the, the heap of misunderstandings and veils of understanding of the human samsaric cycle, and creates a truly intimate communication, realization, awakening of a condition which we cannot share with words and expressions and faces and intonations and the whole, but through a common mirror and an invocation which is specific to each individual who does it, toward the Dharma, the one vehicle, then we all intimately belong to the same awakening. It's an amazing methodology. All right. So anyway, I got off on a tangent, but I guess it was necessary. This is the benefit of Daimoku. Um, so now let's endeavor into part 3 of meditation, concentration, and insight. And what we're going to get here, as sometimes happens with Nichiren, is he doesn't miss a teaching opportunity. So at first, we're going to be reminded that there was a lot of panic when Shakyamuni Buddha was uh, about to leave the earthly body, samsaric body, right? And when he was going to enter nirvana of no remainder, be gone, bye-bye. Excuse me, a dry mouth again this morning. Okay, let's see if I can keep going now. So you can read the whole Nirvana Sutra is about, the Parinirvana Sutra is all about his final sermon on his deathbed, right? And there's a lot of panic uh, because we're attaching beings, right? So if you've got this amazing teacher, leader in your midst, and now you know it's a foregone conclusion. He's leaving. Uh, he or she, right? Just understand there's no sexual distinctions at this point. Buddhism, the Lotus Sutra certainly has evacuated that from our prejudices or predilections, if you will. So there's a lot of panic about it, and one of the things that this Gosho talks about is, again, resolute mind, right? And resolute mind comes from you and I. It doesn't come from a person like Shakyamuni Buddha. It comes from Buddha, which is not a person. It's a life condition that we all have inherently. So if you go there, then you have the same support that you would if Shakyamuni was sitting right in front of you. And we can only perceive that in our human minds with a Gohan-san as an object to feel that mirrored connection of what? Our own Buddha mind, our own Shakyamuni. So it's a very personal, intimate relationship with your enlightenment, isn't it? So uh, the first, not the first part, but the first part of part 3, we'll get some of that from Nichiren, and then he'll use that to launch into his question and answer form of answering doubt, because even in Nichiren's day, the same doubt existed: is where does this come from? Where do we go? Always this other, instead of owning that this is within ourselves. And what we end up getting is another history lesson. History lesson in so much as it's a documentary history lesson, not, and then King so and so invaded this country. It's going to be based on documentation to indicate why you should be free from doubt that this is the ultimate supreme teaching of Buddha, of Buddhahood, of Buddhism. Um, so I'm just telling you ahead of time, you're going to hear a lot of facts here. Not in the first part, but certainly in the second, to eliminate doubt. And you may have doubt. Why Nichiren Buddhism? Why this particular evolution of all the teachings? Why this combination of thoughts? This is just another sect, right? But there is Nichiren is quite a scholar, and so he nails it down for all of us. Anyway, I'll just get into it now. See, I missed you. That's why I have to talk so much. From throughout the 5 regions of India, its 16 great states, its 500 middle states, its 10,000 small states, and its countless smaller states, scattered about like grains of millet, the people gathered together, none having had time to prepare clothing or food, and without distinction as to class or status. Now, this is kind of a statement, again, reinforcing that Buddhism and what Shakyamuni's whole mission was, is to make this teaching, this one vehicle, pervasive for anyone, no matter what their state or status, could simply start to practice and have that intimate relationship I mentioned earlier. Oxen and horses, wolves and dogs, eagles and vultures, gnats and gadflies, to the number of 52 different species, also gathered together. Those of any one species were more numerous than dust particles of the land, to say nothing of the number of all 52 species together. There we go with the, I don't know why this word eludes me every time I go to use it, the hyperbole, excuse me, the hyperbole of all of the Dharma, right? Because it is incalculable, literally. There are new beings born every moment, and their particular perception of the world will have to be addressed through their own practice and teaching. So we can't just lay down a number on the table and go, look, this many times. It's constantly expanding, right? All these different species of beings brought flowers, incense, clothing, food as their last offerings to the Buddha. Their voices resounded, crying out that the jeweled bridge for all living beings was about to collapse. Now, see, the jeweled bridge for all living beings was about to collapse. What does that indicate to you? That even in flowery words, they're talking about Shakyamuni Buddha as being a bridge. You've heard Gosho state that this is to cross the sea of suffering, the ship to. But there's an important distinction I want to point out there. When these people were looking at the jeweled bridge for all living beings that it was about to collapse, they were still identifying Shakyamuni Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, as being the bridge to take them to another place. They still weren't getting it. A ship to cross the sea of suffering isn't about Shakyamuni Buddha. It's about Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. It's about your ship to cross the sea of your suffering. It's a very different picture, right? So you can tell that the people, and Nichiren understood this, the people of Buddha's time, of Shakyamuni's time, still weren't quite getting it, right? But Shakyamuni knew this. He taught this. He said in the future, right? And he saw the path of evolution of human mind. And even though most human minds in his day weren't particularly ready to have their awakening moment, he knew that in time, with enough study, that they would. And part of his, excuse me, part of what he wanted to do with his own death was to, and this is the Nirvana Sutra, was to reinforce that Buddhahood isn't him, that it is something achievable to you. Just continue to practice, he said. Just continue to practice as you have been, and you'll get it. You don't need me. Don't follow me, right? How many times did he say that? Don't follow me. Don't follow the words. Follow your intuition, your insight. This is the method. Do it, and you will arrive. Right? So how is Nietzsche going to reinforce this? Anyway, moving on. That the eye of all living beings was about to be put out, that the parent, sovereign, and teacher of all living beings was about to pass away. Not only did their hair stand on end, but their tears flowed. Not only did their tears flow, but they beat their heads, pressed their hands to their chests, and cried aloud. not sparing their voices. The blood of their tears and the blood of their sweat fell upon Kushinagara more heavily than a torrential rain and flowed more abundantly than a mighty river. Again, hyperbole. All this they did solely because the Lotus Sutra had opened for them the way to Buddhahood. See, it's in the words. The Lotus Sutra had opened for them the way to Buddhahood, not Shakyamuni. And they could never repay the debt of gratitude they owed the Buddha. So they saw the debt of gratitude they owed the Buddha to be the lavish thanks and provisions they would give Shakyamuni. What Nichiren is pointing out is that it's Buddha, not Shakyamuni, that they owe their debt of gratitude. And what's Buddha? They already have it. They need to acknowledge how precious their own awakening is. It's like being in a long-term relationship with someone. There's first part of the relationship, the first blush. There's a lot of reward in it. There's a lot of fantastic experience and wonderment and exploration and confidence, and it's all smiles, right? And after a while, human beings as we are, that begins to lose its luster. And it takes a while, but if you can stick with it, analogy, practice Buddhism, you can stay with it, there comes a time, earlier or later, or many times actually, but what starts to happen, and I'm describing something you might call love, you start to realize the benefits of being in it. You start to have a deeper appreciation for what this relationship really has done to you personally, how it's evolved you, how it's changed you, it would be hard to be without and live a fulfilling life. So the debt of gratitude becomes an eye-opening. A debt seems like a negative thing to say, but or a guilty thing to say. But what Nichiren is trying to point out here in all of Buddhist dogma or teaching, written teaching, uses these words. That's why I said dogma, because if you stick to the words, that's what you get. Buddhism is anything but dogma. It's a method for your enlightenment. But if you stick to the words, you have things like debt of gratitude. What does that mean? Owed to the Buddha means, again, it's that otherness, right? That is a fallacy. So why does it say that? So the debt owed the Buddha is not a person. It's not a personage. It's a state of mind. And the debt you owe is a responsibility of awakening, of staying awake. Okay, even in this scene of grief, there were those who declared angrily that the enemies of the Lotus Sutra should have their tongues cut out, that they should never be allowed to sit with the others in the assembly. That sounds like a very violent thought, right? You would think, well, that's not very Buddhist, right? Bodhisattva Kashyapa vowed that he would appear in the form of frost and hail in the lands of the enemies of the Lotus Sutra. Again, a violent act, and coming from a, quote, bodhisattva, end quote. Again, something most people would not think very Buddhist, because the worldview of you and I is that we're supposed to be pacifists, that we would not hurt a fly, right? At that time, the Buddha raised himself slightly from his reclining position and praised him, saying happily, "Well spoken, well spoken." This is Shakyamuni speaking, right? What he's doing is he's lauding their sense of responsibility for the Dharma. He knows they're not just going to pick up rifles and start shooting people who say, you Buddhists, blah, blah, blah. What they're doing is upholding the Dharma, the teaching of the Lotus Sutra, the teaching in its entirety, the potential for all human beings to reveal their inherent enlightenment, their awakening. So that's a very different take on these outbursts, right? So everything in context. Moving on, the other bodhisattvas, guessing where the Buddha's wishes lay, suppose that if they declared their intention to attack the enemies of the Lotus Sutra, this might prolong the Buddha's life a little. Let's encourage him to stay. Let's say statements like this too. In this way, the bodhisattvas and the heavenly and human beings called upon the enemies of the Lotus Sutra to appear, hoping that if they could fulfill the oath they had taken in the presence of the Buddha, then Shakyamuni Buddha, as well as many treasures and other Buddhas and thus come ones, would understand that a resolute mind with conviction to the vow they made before the Buddha, they would begrudge neither their reputation nor their lives in defense of the Lotus Sutra. So now he's made it more explicit in defense of the teachings, right? Raises their ire. One may ask why the results of these vows should be so long in appearing. And yet, though one might point at the earth and miss it, though one might bind up the sky, though the tides might cease to ebb and flow, and the sun rise in the west, it could never come about that the meditations of the practitioners of the Lotus Sutra would go unanswered. If the bodhisattvas, the human and heavenly beings, the 8 kinds of non-human beings, the 2 sages, the 2 heavenly deities, and the 10 demon daughters would by some unlikely chance fail to appear and protect the practitioners of the Lotus Sutra, then above them they would be showing disdain for Shakyamuni and the other Buddhas, and below they would be guilty of deceiving the beings in the 9 realms, or of the 9 realms. It makes no difference if the practitioner himself is lacking in worth, defective in wisdom, impure in his person, and lacking in virtue derived from observing the precepts. So long as he chants Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, they will invariably protect him. One does not throw away gold because the bag that holds it is dirty. Again, calling attention to the Buddha being an inherent aspect of all life, all living things, you and I. And no matter what your current course is in life, what's your stature, what mistakes you've made, whatever your circumstance, when you chant Myoho Renge Kyo, Tugo Hanzan, to enlighten your own Buddha nature, none of that, none of the other stuff, even, it doesn't matter. It matters in the way that it creates karma, more obstacles for yourself, but it doesn't matter to your enlightened state. It's untouched by that. I think this analogy of the gold in a money bag is really good. One does not ignore the sandalwood trees because of the foul odor of the aranda trees around them, and one does not refuse to gather lotuses because the pond in the valley where they grow is not clean. If they ignore the practitioner of the Lotus Sutra, they will be going against their vow. Now that the former and middle days of the law are over, persons who observe the precepts are as rare as as tigers in the marketplace. A person of wisdom harder to find than the horns of a chi lin. While waiting for the moon to rise, one must rely on a lantern, and when there are no true gems at hand, gold and silver must serve as jewels. The debt of gratitude one owes to a white crow may be repaid to a black crow, and the debt one owes to a sage priest may be repaid to an ordinary priest, because it's in the intent, in the act, in your samsaric mind. So, if you earnestly meditate that blessings be given to you without delay, how can your meditations fail to be answered? Question. Here we go. When I examine the reasoning and the textual proofs you have presented above, I would have to say that if there are a sun and moon in the sky, if there are plants and trees on the earth, if there are a day and night in this country of ours, then so long as the earth fails to turn upside down and the tides of the ocean continue to ebb and flow, there can be no doubt that the meditations of those who put resolute mind of determination in the Lotus Sutra will be answered in this world, and that they will enjoy good circumstances in their next existence. Nevertheless, here comes the question. During the past 20 years and more, the eminent leaders of the Tendai and True Word schools have in many cases offered meditations regarding important matters of state, but such meditations have by no means proved effective. Indeed, the meditations of these priests would seem to have been even less effective than those of persons who support the teachings of non-Buddhist scriptures. This sets me to wondering if the pronouncements of the Lotus Sutra are in some way false. If the actions of the practitioners of the sutra are to blame, or if the time of the people's capacity is not appropriate for such actions, and this puts me in doubt regarding my future existence. But leaving that point aside for a moment, I am told that you were a disciple of the priests of Mount Hai. They say that the offenses of the fathers are visited upon the sons, and those of the teachers are visited upon the disciples. When the priests of Mount Hiei burned the halls and pagodas of Onjoji Temple and of the Mountain Temple, along with thousands and tens of thousands of Buddhist images and sutras, those were terrible deeds. They threw the people of the time into turmoil and turned them against Mount Hiei. What is your opinion? I have heard a little about these events in the past, but I would like to now hear you speak in greater detail. I am full of questions. When priests behave in such an evil manner, it seems to me that they are no longer acting in accord with the spirit of the three treasures, and that the heaven and earth would no longer lend them shelter. I would suppose, therefore, that their meditations would not be answered. What is your opinion? Now, obviously, you probably picked up on the error in this question already. He's speaking of these other sects and these other teachers as meditations based on their beliefs, not the Lotus, not Myoho Renge-kyo, right? So here comes the answer. I have touched on this matter in the past, but this time I will summarize the issues. This is a matter of vital concern to the country of Japan, and because many people fail to understand it, they create negative karma through their own words. As I was saying earlier, they're only affecting themselves, right? First of all, which is contradicts their ability to enlightenment, right? So it's terrible karma. First of all, as to the origin of the temple on Mount Hiei, it was founded by the great teacher Dengyo in the reign of Emperor Kamu, some 200 years after Buddhism was introduced to this country. Earlier, Prince Shotoku had declared that Kyoto which was later to become the capital, appeared to be highly suitable for the royal residence. But the actual founding of the capital at that location was delayed until after the Tendai school had been introduced to Japan, according to the records of Prince Jogu or Shotoku. The prince stated, quote, 200 years or more after my passing, the Buddhist law will spread throughout Japan, end quote. Later, in the Nryaku era, 782 to 806, the great teacher Dengyo founded the temple on Mount Hiei, and Emperor Kamu established the capital Hyankyo. Thus, the prophecy of Prince Shotoku was fulfilled. In this way, the mountain temple and the royal house were like the pine and the cypress, and resemble the orchids and the grasses. When the pine withers, the cypress too is bound to wither, and when the orchids wilt, the grasses wilt as well. Thus it seems that the prosperity of the royal reign brought joy to the mountain temple, and that the decline of royal power brought sadness to the mountain. And now that the world has changed, the power has passed to the government in the Kanto region, and what must be their thoughts? In the third year of Jokyu era, 1221, the year with the cyclical sign Kanto Mi, on the 19th day of the fourth month, around the time of the disturbance between the court and the barbarian warriors, by command of the retired Emperor Oki, altars were set up, and the 15 secret ceremonies were carried out for the first time by 41 practitioners of such secret ceremonies in an attempt to overcome the Kanto government through the power of incantation. These ceremonies included the one-character gold-wheeled ceremony carried out by the administrator of priest Jien, the Tendai chief priest, and 12 attendant priests at the command of Imperial Regent Motomichi. The ceremony of the four heavenly kings, carried out by the Imperial Minister of Priests of Jokoji Temple, Shinsho, with 8 attendant priests at Hirose Palace, at the command of Lady Shumeimonin. The ceremony of the Wisdom King, Immovable, carried out by the administrator of priest Joho and 8 accompanying priests at the command of Lord Kazanin Zemon Fujiwara Tadatsuni. The Great Awesome Virtue Ceremony, carried out by the administrator of priest Kangon, with 8 accompanying priests at the command of Lady Shichijoin. The ceremony of the Wheel-Turning King, carried out by the administrator of priest Joken, with 8 accompanying priests and at the command of the same person as above. The 10-altar Great Awesome Virtue Ceremony, carried out by the 10 priests, the administrator of priest Kakucho, the Dharma Seal Shunsho, the Dharma Seal Eshin, the Dharma Seal Goen, the supervisor of priest Yuen, the administrator of priest Jiken, the supervisor of priest Kenjo, and the supervisor of priest Senson, the supervisor of priest Gyohen, and the Dharma I Chikaku, along with 6 attendant priests, each carried out, for the most part, at the main temple building. The ceremony of wish-granting wheel, carried out by the administrator of priest Myokoin, with 8 accompanying priests at the command of Lady Gishumonin, and the ceremony of Heavenly King Vaishravana, carried out by the administrative priest Jojuin, the Yoson, of Mii, with 6 accompanying priests at the command of Shichin. Phew! And there were also objects of devotion that were fashioned in a single day. The secret ceremonies based on them included the ceremony of Wisdom King carving filled of the prescribed method, carried out by the head of Ninnaji Temple in Shininden Palace from the 3rd day of the 5th month and for the following 14 days. The ceremony of Buddha, and on and on and on. All these ceremonies. On the 15th day of the 5th month, Igataro Hogan Mitsushui had attacked and defeated, was attacked and defeated in the capital. On the 19th day of the same month, word of this reached Kamakura. When the news arrived in capital that the large forces of troops had been dispatched on the 21st day to attack the capital, the remainder of the ceremonies were performed beginning on the 8th day of the 6th month. These consisted of the ceremony of the Honorable Stark King, performed and so on and so on. So all these ceremonies were performed after the attack, or that the attacks were imminent in Kamakura. On the 21st day of the 5th month, Governor Musashi started for the capital on the Tokaido Road, while the leader of the Genji clan of Kai set out on the Tosando Road, and Lord Shikibu advanced via the Hokuriko Road. On the 5th day of the 6th month, the defending forces of the Otsu were defeated by the Kenji of Kai, and on the 13th day, 14th and 14th days of the 6th month, the two sides engaged in battle at the Uji Bridge. On the 14th, the defenders of the capital suffered defeat, and on the 15th of the same month, the governor of Musashi entered the Rokujo headquarters along with his men. So, a lot of historical context here. I'm looking at my time to see if I'm going on too long here. How far are we from Nichiren's point? Yeah, still a few pages. I think I'm going to continue until I finish this. This will complete my second book of Gosho. We'll move on to the third after that. But I may just cut this and make it 2 episodes. We'll see how long it goes. So I'll get back to it right now. On the 11th day of the 7th month, the retired Emperor Gotoba was banished to the Isle province of Oki. The retired Emperor Chuchimakado was banished to the province of Awa, and the retired Emperor Juntoku was banished to the island province of Sado. In addition, 7 members of the court were put to death. So, the great evil doctrine of these ceremonies over the years steadily made its way to the Kanto region, where it was embodied in the superintendents or attendant priests of various temples who repeatedly performed these ceremonies. The performers of these ceremonies from the beginning could not distinguish between correct and erroneous teachings, but assumed that it was sufficient merely to revere the 3 treasures. So, without a thought, they employed these ceremonies, and now not only the provinces of Kanto, but the chief priests and superintendents of Mount Hiei, Toji, and Anjoji, have all come under the jurisdiction of the Kanto authorities, so that as a result, the latter are in the possession of supporting these ceremonies. Right? So he's explaining in historic and current terms to the questioner that the evidence shows that what they were meditating with, the method, the prayers they were offering, the method of practice they were using, was not the Lotus Sutra. It was based on other teachings. The promise made earlier of protection of the Buddhist gods, deities, forces, supporting your Buddhist practice, your chanting Myaho, the Daimoku and Gohonzon, is not that. It's not these earlier erroneous understandings of Buddhism. So if you're practicing correctly, in other words, if you're practicing your own Buddha nature, then of course it's supported. It's supported by your samsaric existence and your correct practice. So this question misses the mark. Like he said, you can look directly at the earth, shoot at it, and miss it because you don't understand. I hope this is becoming clear to you? This is a very long-winded answer and a question he himself poses because he understands that people are not understanding or looking at this correctly. This question misses the mark, as I said earlier, and asks about, well, all these prayers weren't unheeded, unanswered, so why should we believe you that you know chanting daimoku is automatically going to protect our and accomplish our desire? Because that is the actual method of Buddhism. Is when you chant, when you invoke Myoho Renge Kyo, you are speaking directly to your Buddha, your Buddha-ness, your true suchness. So the reward is in the doing. It's immediate. But people are still not getting this, right? They're still looking at prayer as like a wishing for something to happen in the future. That's not Buddhism. That's something else. That's magical thinking. That's religion, right? In Buddhism, we change our life now in this moment. And if because of that change, it affects every future moment because it stays with us. We don't hope and then sit around the campfire and go, is it coming? Is it coming? That's not what we do. That's not Buddhism. Please understand this, that your Buddha suchness, your awakened, your enlightened self, happens as a result of your practice. When you chant Daimoku to Gohonzon and you fuse with Gohonzon, some days that may happen immediately. Sometimes there's so much emotional garbage in your way, it takes 20 minutes, an hour, 2 hours. I've done chanting. What's the word? Uh, Extended daimoku periods with friends through an entire night till sunrise the next morning. And I'm telling you, that next morning, I felt unglued from the earth. I was just a big floating smile in space. It was everything. It was like being what it must be like to be a tiny child, a baby, an infant. Just everything was just wonder. And as an adult, that just made me smile. It took a long time to fuse that evening, especially because there were so many people in the room that the distractions were there. But those distractions fell away rather quickly in comparison. And that dedication to stay in it, in that Buddha, it just amazing, amazing. But that's our challenge in samsara, is to maintain that awakening, to stay awake. And the more you chant, the more you do. But as Nichiren would say, there's not a moment in the day when I'm not in Myoho Renge Kyo. That's what he's talking about. All right. Actually, I got distracted, but I think this is the great point of this, and I am going to just make a part 4. So, because I think that's a good wrapping point. So I'm going to mark this, and I'm going to once again thank you, and I mean this profoundly. Thank you for your support. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Doing these lessons, whether they appear here on this YouTube channel, or Cocoscope, or my PayPal channel at /TLK, patreon.com/TLK, or whether now, as I'm expanding it, my new podcast, which is available all over the place, the Buddhahood Podcast. That's the title. And didn't have to think too much about that one. The Buddhahood Podcast, the full name. If you just put Buddhahood in there, you'll get some music videos and other things. The Buddhahood podcast. Perhaps I should have named it Myoho Renge Kyo. But the mission of my channels, my outreach, is bigger than just the Lotus Sutra. It is the Lotus Sutra. I'm correcting myself in a way, but only if you understand, and if you've been with me a while, you know that the Lotus Sutra stands on the shoulders of all other sutras, commentaries, scholarship. That's what I'm about. Because the Lotus Sutra really doesn't do you any good if you don't understand what the Lotus Sutra is, what it represents. And the only way you can do that, if any of you have read the Lotus Sutra at all, is to dig deeper into everything it says, because it's like summiting a mountain. It's like taking a helicopter to the top of Everest. It's mind-blowing, sure, but it's a far different knowledge of the summit than to those who have climbed it from the floor. They have a far deeper appreciation and understanding of what it is to summit Everest. So here's the Lotus Sutra. It's incredible. But to understand how incredible it is, to really fully grasp and experience the summit of the Lotus Sutra, really requires that you get to know what it's built upon. There's so much conceptual language in Buddhist teachings that until you firmly grasp for yourself in your own way, that is your path. Your individual path is your understanding of all those concepts. When you get to your Lotus Sutra, that will be a singular, precious experience. And that's why I do these things, for you to understand that. If you can support me financially, I don't know how to express my gratitude there, because it's not just my gratitude. The more I'm able to offer these things, I just, in other words, Jay Don just joined on I was going to say PayPal, on Patreon. Wonderful monthly donation. Jay, thank you. Because Jay not only helps me and himself, but he helps all of us. It's helping you right now. That's the nature of supporting Myoho Renge Kyo. That's all I'm trying to do. So when I say, if you can, and you do, support this channel, listen to my podcasts, which are basically just these videos in audio form. So you have more occasion, maybe while you're working, driving, whatever. Not everyone has a computer handy, and you shouldn't be watching videos while you're driving. Okay. But Jay and George Lazari, Jay's in the UK, George is in New Orleans, John Kellogg's in California, Christopher Murray, all of you guys on Patreon. Thank you so much. And if I missed one of your names, please just chalk it up to senility. But, I so deeply appreciate you join me in this mission. You don't simply just support me, you support the mission, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Because none of this is about me, except selfishly, it sure does supercharge my practice. So that I can't personally thank you for. But your support and just watching adds the numbers. It helps our Sangha grow. It is promulgation of the Dharma. So please know that. Thank you. Thank you so much. Keep practicing. I know it's the end of the year. A lot of weird stuff happens at the transition of years. That's a samsaric thing. It's a human thing, but it's undeniable. So, starting to accumulate thoughts for my New Year's Gongyo, which I hope I'll be able to broadcast. Uh, Still figuring out this technology. It changes daily. Um, and with that, I will let you go. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Please take care of your health. Bye-bye.